Israel has methodically destroyed all institutions that sustain civil society in Gaza: schools, universities, civil administration, courts, police precincts, hospitals, water treatment plants, museums. But its most important target in its systematic destruction of civil society and the infrastructure that sustains it is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA. UNRWA, established in the wake of the 1948 war that saw the creation of Israel, provides basic services to about 5 million Palestinian refugees in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. Israel's long animus towards UNRWA reached a new intensity following the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th. Israeli officials accused UNRWA employees of collaborating with Hamas militants in the attack, a charge that led to an internal investigation by the UN agency and the dismissal of 9 of its 13,000 employees. The charge saw the United States and other donor nations suspend funding to UNRWA, although most nations, with the exception of the United States, later resumed contributions. In 2023, the United States provided $371 million to UNRWA, about 30% of its annual operating costs. But Israel was not done. The Israeli parliament, or Knesset, promulgated 2 laws in October 2024 to effectively outlaw the UN agency. The first law prohibits Israeli officials from having any contact with UNRWA or any individual or agency acting on their behalf. The second bars UNRWA from operating any representative office, providing any services, or carrying out any activities directly or indirectly in Israel. In January, UNRWA was banned from Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank. UNRWA has not been permitted to bring humanitarian aid into Gaza, including medicines, medical supplies, and food, since March 2nd. UNRWA warehouses in Egypt and Jordan have enough stockpiled food, medicine, and hygiene supplies to fill 6,000 trucks. The war against UNRWA, which has included the killing by Israel of 360 UNRWA employees since the genocide began, has been accompanied by food shortages in Gaza that have resulted in widespread malnutrition and starvation. At least 100 children have succumbed in recent weeks to malnutrition and hunger. At the same time, Israel has set up the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that uses poultry food packages to lure hungry and starving Palestinians to southern Gaza, where they will be held in concentration camps overseen by the Israeli military. The chaotic scramble to get a food package from one of 4 distribution points — UNRWA used to have 400 food hubs — has seen close to 2,000 Palestinians killed and thousands wounded by Israeli soldiers and U.S. mercenaries that run the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Joining me to discuss Israel's orchestrated starvation, attack on civil society, and war on UNRWA is Mara Kronenfeld, Executive Director of UNRWA USA. So, Mara, let's just begin with the importance of UNRWA. And, of course, I've spent a lot of time in Gaza and the West Bank. They run the schools because of, especially in Gaza, since the election of Hamas in 2006, the borders have been tightly controlled by Israel. We can't stress how vital UNRWA is. So just lay out what UNRWA does, and maybe you can amplify a little bit as to why Israel hates the organization so much.
Sure. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for having me and shedding additional light on this very important topic, especially right now, as you've mentioned, watching the killing machine that is GHF in Gaza, and UNRWA really is the moral inverse of GHF. So until these atrocities of these last 22 months, UNRWA essentially operated as the de facto, as you mentioned, Ministry of Education, educating over 60% of young people, kindergarten through 9th grade, a de facto Ministry of Health in many aspects, because so many of the primary and secondary health clinics were run by UNRWA. There's a network of health clinics across Gaza, and then a Ministry of kind of Civil Affairs. UNRWA was while UNRWA did not kind of own the refugee camps. UNRWA was certainly in charge of the civil infrastructure, of building out new shelters, repairing shelters that were damaged every time an Israeli bomb was lobbed toward neighborhoods in Gaza. And so UNRWA was almost, alongside the ruling party of Hamas, was almost a kind of governmental operation in the breadth of its services and in the depth of its services. How many people that UNRWA served? A good over 60% of the population, prior to October 7th, were refugees, and UNRWA's mandate, of course, is for refugees. Now, unfortunately, as we've all seen, the entire population of Gaza is refugees. UNRWA performs similar services in East Jerusalem, in the West Bank, in Jordan, in Syria, and in Lebanon. But Gaza was the place that had and still has the greatest number of UNRWA employees. Of the 33,000 employees that have worked at UNRWA across the 5 field sites that I mentioned, 13,000 of them worked in Gaza, and there are still 12,000 UNRWA employees in Gaza today on the ground. And while you said absolutely true, Israel has banned UNRWA, what is not clear to many, and one of the things I want to clarify, is that UNRWA staff, who are Palestinian themselves, are still on the ground and still doing a lot of key essential work. And I'll expound on that further as we continue this conversation. But in terms of Israel's animus toward UNRWA, it has been there a long time. Certainly, Israel didn't want to be responsible for the food and care and schooling of this population. They kind of begrudgingly let UNRWA, obviously a UN agency, do this work with the support of the world community, both via a mandate at the UN that was renewed every few years, and the bilateral support that came from nations around the world. And as you mentioned, the U.S. being primary among them. The U.S. has funded UNRWA about $7 billion over the course of UNRWA's lifetime. And in Gaza, UNRWA has had the longest food operation, basically 76 years of providing food to populations in need, the longest food operation ever on the planet. So the problematic with UNRWA when it comes to Israel is that UNRWA appeared to represent the so-called right of return, whereby refugees would have a right to return to that land they were forcibly displaced from. And in reality, that right is instituted outside of whether UNRWA exists or not, but UNRWA appeared to people to uphold that right. And that is one of the reasons UNRWA has been attacked. And then I hate to say it, but as we come to today and I'm watching what the mass killing of civilians by the Israeli authorities, by the Israeli military, and the killing machine that is GHF, it is very clear that UNRWA was disliked because for the very fact that it is keeping, and it has kept and has continued to keep Palestinians alive. And while keeping Palestinians alive, and is this idea that there will be a future sovereign Palestinian state. And that is something clearly this Israeli government has absolutely no interest in, and is attempting to destroy all potential for that future state, both in the absolute destruction of Gaza, as you've seen, and now we're seeing in the invasions in the West Bank and the attempt to bifurcate the West Bank in half.
Well, they've also attacked UNRWA installations outside of Gaza, yes, in East Jerusalem, I think where its headquarters was, correct? And then also I just read in Jenin and in the West Bank.
Yes. Yes, they are, and in East Jerusalem, if you can imagine, even with the Knesset laws, UNRWA was still UNRWA teachers. The primary operation in East Jerusalem was schools, and UNRWA teachers were still teaching. Students were still going there up until a couple of months ago, when the army and some municipal actors raided the schools and scared the living hell out of young school kids, and so now these school kids in East Jerusalem are not going to school because yes, they forcibly removed the teachers and the students from the UNRWA schools.
The foreign staff had to leave Gaza from UNRWA. Although, as you mentioned, you have 12 or 13,000 Palestinian employees who receive salaries.
Yes.
And this is a very important point that's lost on a lot of people, the economic impact of UNRWA. Perhaps you can explain.
Yeah. UNRWA it was, essentially the largest employer, and is today, I'm sure, because there's not much other of a commercial sector, of course, in Gaza right now. UNRWA was essentially the largest non-governmental employer in Gaza, and yes, a lot of the economy depended on those salaries that UNRWA employees received, and their ability to buy goods and services with those salaries. So it's not, when there are attempts to eradicate UNRWA in Gaza, it's not just eradicate the helpers, the key humanitarians. It's not just eradicate the educators, the people who have provided a first-rate education to 600,000 students a year, with those students graduating with higher the Thanawiyama, their graduation levels were higher under UNRWA than the public school system by far, and at a very cost-effective rate. So they're destroying the educators. They're destroying. They're attempting to destroy the helpers, the humanitarians, but they're also doing further damage to any commercial activity, the ability for people to pay for those goods and services that are desperately needed by starving people today. So and it is one of the only ways in which people are getting in Gaza are getting a regular salary at this moment.
And with this assault, the cutting of aid, after these accusations, which, let's be clear, Israel never provided any evidence to support these accusations, which is fairly common. Let's talk a little bit about what you're able to do and how effectively Israel has been able to cripple your operations.
Yeah, so these 12,000 staff in Gaza are providing immense support at this time. So no matter how many trucks get in or don't, and as you mentioned, UNRWA has the equivalent of 6,000 trucks of emergency food aid, of medicine, of hygiene materials. Mind you, the Israelis have not let sanitary napkins into Gaza for months. There's a silent epidemic of some 700,000 young women who don't have access to sanitary napkins to care. Again, it's just another detail which is utterly beyond the pale. Why sanitary napkins could be dangerous in Gaza right now. So UNRWA is providing on the ground the primary health care, because the hospital system in Gaza has been so systematically attacked and nearly destroyed. UNRWA is providing 60% of all medical consultations right now. So those are the doctors and nurses and health workers that are really the front line of medical care, if you can call it that right now in Gaza. And then those workers are also cleaning the toxic waste, essentially, that has has accumulated everywhere in Gaza, and this is even more important with the temperatures being so high. We're seeing waterborne illnesses, people having rashes. So the cleanup of toxic waste is essential. And UNRWA is also the primary. UNRWA staff are the individuals, the engineers with the knowledge of how to repair the water wells when they've been damaged, so that the population can get water whenever possible, and also run the desalination pumps. A lot of this work, though, I should say, is dependent on fuel, and that's another thing that the Israelis are not letting in, and when they're letting in, only in dribs and drabs. And finally, UNRWA is the front line of trauma support for children, trying to provide any sense of normalcy in what is an indescribable, unbearable situation that I shudder every time I really think about what it would be like to be a child, a parent, anybody in Gaza right now.
When the genocide began, one of the things we saw was Israel targeting UNRWA facilities, schools, warehouses, and let's be clear, Israel bombs individual wells to destroy them. But that was an indication of where we were going. UNRWA and, of course, as I mentioned, 360 employees were killed, many of them in targeted assassinations. So the attacks, the attempt to dismantle UNRWA began almost immediately.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And mind you, it is very clear from the sky, at least so I've been told, and I certainly believe this, that each UN building, each UNRWA building has the blue UN flag on the roof of the building. So the Israeli military knew very well what it was targeting and and the buildings that it was destroying. And the very even sadder and diabolical aspect of this is it wasn't just targeting UNRWA itself, although that was a key target. These buildings that were being bombed from the early days following October 7th were shelters. So the primary buildings that have been destroyed or damaged, heavily damaged, were actually UNRWA schools that time after time had become shelters in times where Gaza was being bombarded by Israel, and those schools had become safe places during the many different bombing campaigns. And then Israel effectively destroyed so many of these shelters post-October 2023. And that is one of the reasons we have something which was never happened in Gaza before, which is a vast amount of people, including women and children, sleeping on the street. This is absolutely something that did not take place in Gaza. And it's made only worse. And why people are sleeping in the streets and not even in makeshift camps is another supply that Israel has not allowed in is our tents and tent poles. Again, it's diabolical to force people to be out in the open under such conditions. Just diabolical.
Talk about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You mentioned it. What is it doing? Of course, the United States and Israel argues that this is going to be UNRWA's replacement.
It is, as I said in the beginning, it is the moral and operational inverse of UNRWA. As you mentioned, UNRWA had 400 sites from which they distributed aid to people in need. UNRWA's aid delivery was based on principles of neutrality, transparency, the dignity of the beneficiaries. And UNRWA, the reason there are 400 sites is because the necessity to bring aid to where people are, and the knowledge that not everybody, and particularly the most vulnerable in the population, can travel to aid sites. And so one of the biggest problems and really, I believe, intentional intentional operational realities of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was to only have a couple of sites, and as you mentioned, that are in the south, very close to the Egyptian border. And this meant that the only people who could really travel the 9 to 12 kilometers to these sites were those who were young men primarily, who were not disabled or elderly. And then what we've seen is those people seeking aid, those desperate people, then being shot at. And shot at not only by the by people working, the mercenaries, the American mercenaries working at GHF, but by the IDF as well, as they queue in lines. You can't call these lines; these are cages, like animals. And I'll talk about the modality. If you could, you can't call modality of how they distribute aid. You can't say distribution. I'll come to that in a second. But what I want to go back to is that the people who are not getting this aid, who do not have access to this aid, are the disabled, are the widows who are left to care for their children, are the orphans, are the elderly. So the most needy in Gaza right now are not able to get that aid. And then when you do, when you are able to make it these 9-12 kilometers, starving, beleaguered, you stand in line, and then at some point, basically somebody says go, and like a real life Squid Games, you have people racing into an open area to be the first to be thrown food at and to gather that and fight other people. We've heard of people bringing knives to try to be able to be the first one to that food. And then we've also seen, thanks to the brave testimony of Anthony Aguiar, the 25-year Army veteran and former Green Beret, we know that people are being shot at as they try to seek aid. He mentions war crime after war crime in this setting. He talks about a young boy who came to thank him for being a part of provision of some aid, and then that young boy was shot by the IDF in front of his own eyes. So I beg anybody who's listening who thinks somehow that this killing machine is not happening, please listen to the testimony of Anthony Aguiar. If you have any doubt, please listen. It is essential testimony, and it's one that I have to say, I've heard from many sources that our government right now is refusing to hear and even listen to, just pretending it doesn't exist.
Well, it's just bait. It's luring people to the south. They want to put them in ringed, concentration camps, surrounded by security, everyone vetted. And of course, they're trying to preclude any Hamas or any young militants from entering and separating them from the militants. It's often, the aid's often handed out at 2 a.m, only for an hour. What's the goal? Where do you see this going? And of course, now we are watching Israel call up reservists to occupy and obliterate, erase, destroy Gaza City.
Yeah. Well, I can absolutely say it is not humanitarian in its goal. If this was a humanitarian operation, the dignity of the beneficiaries would be front and center. If this was a humanitarian operation, we wouldn't only be talking about the delivery of food. And mind you, we have heard that the food is lentils and rice and things that require water, which in and of themselves, water is hard to get. So these are not necessarily the materials you would be providing a population that has trouble accessing water and that is facing malnutrition and starvation. This wouldn't be the first thing they should necessarily eat. If this were a humanitarian operation, it wouldn't just be food, it would be medicine. It wouldn't just be food, it would be medicine, and it would be shelter items. If this was a humanitarian operation trying to corral people into what they're also called so-called humanitarian cities in the south, there would be plans for education of the children. There would be plans outside of simply feeding people. There would be talk about setting up medical clinics. None of that has been part of the GHF plan. And when you ask about the ultimate goal, the Israeli government, this extremist government, Kahanist government, has said the quiet part out loud. They consistently, if only people in the U.S. would listen to their own words. Smotrich, Minister Smotrich himself said that our goal is to take the population to the south and then make life so horrible for them that they will either leave on their own accord out of Gaza and into Egypt, and or they would be forcibly displaced, essentially ongoing ethnic cleansing to remove them from Gaza. They've said that out loud. So it's no surprise to any of us who are paying attention to their own words. And mind you, they've also called Gaza's children animals, children of darkness, snakes, that there are no innocent children. Should not be surprising to any of us what GHF, this Israel and U.S.-backed GHF, is doing, given the words of Israeli leaders themselves.
And the response of the international community and the UN.
Yeah, so UNRWA has been very clear. Most of the UN has been very clear that this is not how humanitarian aid is done. This is really, the war crimes that somebody like Anthony Aguiar has witnessed, that many, I hate to even focus on him because how many Palestinians have been saying this but have not been believed. But I think it's really important to note that this is a new era. If we're talking about for-profit aid distribution, we're talking about weaponized aid distribution. Actually, before that, even weaponized hunger, on purpose, starvation of a population to make them so weak and terrified and beleaguered that the hope is from the Israeli side that they leave. This is really new, and this is something that unfortunately could be modeled in Sudan. It could be taken to other places, and we're seeing kind of the end of an international, of an idea that even in war there are rules. And a kind of post-World War II ideology that even in war there are rules, that there are understanding of international human rights and rule of law. So generally the international community has been against this, but I think it's Chris, I don't know what else to say except to call it a kind of evil rope-a-dope. It's trying to talk about aid to get people on board. So now you have this kind of, you have the GHF saying, hey, don't you want to help people? Meanwhile, they created the very conditions in which people are suffering and being killed. So it's just an evil rope-a-dope. And now we have other humanitarian organizations having to make a decision. Do I do the moral and the right thing, which is not give any credence to this organization or work anywhere near them? Or do I do what they may think is the moral thing and just flood the zone, even if it means working with such an entity as GHF? I think that's what some of the international community are contending with at this very moment.
Does UNRWA have any stockpiles of food left in Gaza?
They have very little. I do know that some of the aid that is in that 6,000 trucks worth of aid, some of it is getting in through partners, from what I understand. So there is some aid getting in, but it's a drop in the bucket. We need 500 to 600 trucks a day just to handle the basic needs of the population, let alone whatever commercial needs and things that would lower the price of basic goods right now, which are flour, $22 a kilo. I mean, just unaffordable to anyone there.
And let's talk about the international community. You've had noises made, Starmer and others, about recognizing a Palestinian state, but nobody cuts off the weapons to Israel.
Yeah, as UNRWA, my focus really, and as UNRWA USA, I should say, is really on the humanitarian side. So we really, our role has not been on the political side as a and so I can't comment from that perspective. But as an individual, just putting my personal hat on, it does. You've asked a very important question, and it's a question I ask myself every day. And Yeah, that's all I can say. I have the same question, Chris.
And the attacks are relentless. They haven't stopped. And now you're facing these lawsuits that are being brought by Zionists accusing the organization of, I mean, you can give the details of essentially being Hamas front or something. Explain what they're doing.
Yeah. So we in about, I believe, January of 2024 or February maybe, we're served a lawsuit. And the lawsuit is by survivors or family members of October 7th who are, I guess, have American citizenship, and it's a totally frivolous lawsuit. It's part of a history of bringing frivolous lawsuits against those organizations supporting Palestinians or Palestinian rights. Center for Constitutional Rights has done a whole expose on the attempt to silence Palestinian support and civil society supporting Palestine through lawfare, through a really deliberate attempt to bring frivolous claims. This is one of them, and the claim was somehow that because UNRWA USA gave funds to UNRWA, that we somehow knowingly gave funds to Hamas. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous, and luckily the judge in the Delaware District Court saw the ridiculousness of it and threw out the lawsuit.
Well, give me some examples, because you had mentioned to me before in the courtroom what they were saying.
Yeah,
it was absurd.
There was absurdities. I think in this setting, and I'm not a lawyer, I should say, but in this setting, you're not arguing in a civil liability. You're not arguing the facts. You're arguing, within the four corners of the lawsuit, is there enough there? And you're looking at precedents and other things. So essentially, in that setting, they could kind of say what they want. And so imagine, and mind you, I have to just preface that. I mean, this shouldn't matter at all, but just to give you some color, I happen to be Jewish. My lawyer, one of our lawyers, is Jewish, and then we had this beautiful community of Methodists who are supporting Palestine, who had worked with me in different times, come to the gallery at the courthouse to give moral support at this time. So this beautiful crowd of people from so many different walks of life, so I felt all this support in the courtroom, which is amazing. But the plaintiff's lawyer said, the judge asked, so you're saying that UNRWA is basically Hamas and something crazy. I mean, absurd, that UNRWA contributed in the building of tunnels, which is just fantastically false. And she said, yeah. And you're telling me, and the judge says, and you're telling me that UNRWA USA knew about this. She's like, yes. And she's saying, you're telling me, the judge said, and you're telling me that there's evidence, you're suggesting there's evidence, like emails. And she said, yes, I believe that there are emails that UNRWA USA wrote to UNRWA talking about Hamas tunnels. I mean, this is utterly false, fanciful, ridiculous, and so just that it's an example of the kind of propaganda that is, that we don't see, that's going around all different places, talking about UNRWA. And I think this year, 2024, at the end of the year, the Israeli government was paying for Hezbollah propaganda on billboards, basically putting a picture of an UNRWA staff member and then putting like a Hamas green bandana on them and basically saying UNRWA is Hamas. I mean, it's so shocking. And putting Google ads. Google allowed the government of Israel to pay for ads to put propaganda against a UN organization. I mean, what world are we living in? It's just shocking, the kind of propaganda, lies, things that could be said that billboard companies will let on their billboards, that Google will let go in a paid ad by a government. Imagine they let the Russian government pay for ads about propaganda about the Ukraine. It's just shocking what has been allowed to happen with, again, like you said, no evidence.
And they're suing for damages. They want money. They want to extract money.
They want money, although we don't have, all our money goes to people in need, so we don't have any money. Sorry, guys, we got no money. But it's also to gum up your work, right? And to wear you down. And I will say, it is exhausting. So bravo to those who, it is exhausting. We are having to focus on fighting frivolous lawsuits, while our exclusive focus should be on saving lives and raising the funds to save lives. Mind you, we don't stop for a minute, but it is to wear us down, to scare us.
Well, and so the Delaware judge threw it out, and they immediately launched another one, didn't they?
We have there's another lawsuit, exactly the same argument, so it's going to go nowhere. And one of the lawyers is the same lawyers, yeah. So is on. There's a lawyer who's on both cases, so yes, they're definitely linked. So just more lawyers' time, more of my time, of our board's time, but you also have some of the most amazing lawyers who are doing what's right, who know what propaganda is, who know the ultimate goals of plaintiffs like these, to wear us down, to try to get us out of business, to scare us out of business. And when your work is on the side of the angels, when you're doing transparent work for all to see, when you're keeping people alive who are being mowed down, that's what keeps you going, doing the right thing, the ethical thing, the true thing. You don't step away from this essential work in the middle of a human-made famine, a genocide. There's no way you can stop this work when civilians are being killed en masse.
You're an Arabic speaker. You have long experience in the region. This has to have taken an emotional toll. What has been the effect of all of this on, not just on you, but on everyone who does this kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, whatever we feel, of course, is nothing. There's no comparison to what people are facing on the ground. I think we've had a front seat, certainly not like those in Gaza, but we are day in and day out seeing the atrocities. And I think what keeps me going is like I said, knowing our work is on the side of the angels and absolutely essential. And that idea that, my grandfather escaped Nazi Germany and his sister's family was murdered by the Nazis, and he said never again, and he meant for anybody, no matter what religion or background. And that's why I do the work I do today. And if I didn't do this work, I would be going against everything I was taught by my grandfather, also my parents, in terms of doing right in the world. But I think that I can't crumble, and the reason I can't crumble is my colleague Hani El Marhoun, who runs our fundraising efforts, our senior director of fundraising. He's had 180, I think it's more close to 200 family members killed in Gaza. 2 of his brothers were targeted and killed. And he keeps getting up every day doing this important work. He keeps fundraising not only for UNRWA USA, but for the Gaza Soup Kitchen, which feeds tens of thousands of people in the north of Gaza. His parents are on the front line of that, keeping a community alive. Every day he hears of a cousin injured. He had just had a cousin who was killed trying to seek aid at GHF. He keeps getting up and doing his work and maintaining a strength of character and a calm that nobody else, I would not be capable if I was faced those same conditions. So if Hanny's not crumbling, there's no way I'm gonna. And so we keep on keeping on, and just hope to God there's a ceasefire, the killing stops, and you know, morality prevails and humanity prevails.
And if people want to donate to UNRWA US
Yes.
or the Soup Kitchen, how do they do that?
Yeah, so you can donate at unrwausa.org/donate. We absolutely could use all contributions. And we get the money out the door. That's why we have no money, because we get it out the door as soon as possible. And something that has given me hope, just in all this darkness, the most beautiful thing, not outside of the staff we have, which are amazing, and our board, is 160,000. Actually, it's now 170,000. I just checked before the call. 171,000 donors, new donors, since October of 2023. And these are Americans, 95% of them Americans from every state in this country, from every economic background, every religious background. The average donation is about $280. So most of this is grassroots. Of course, we have very many people of means supporting as well with six-figure donations. Really, the American people have stepped up while our government has stepped down. Our government froze funding to UNRWA, and through the American people, we've been able to send $68 million to provide relief in Gaza since October of 2024. So any contribution we are grateful for, and we will continue to get this in the hands of those, again, who are providing medical aid on the ground, getting water to people in need, cleaning up waste and you know, the toxic waste in the streets, and being the front line of trauma care for Gaza's children. So we're really grateful for your support, and yes, Hanny will definitely take support at the Gaza Soup Kitchen as well. And because of that support, they've been able to buy these astronomically priced, you know, fruit and vegetables, flour, whatever's available. They can spend the $50 for flour or whatnot, and feed at least some of those folks in the settings where they're able to do their soup kitchens, mostly in the north of Gaza.
And do you know the link for that? How people?
I actually don't, but Gaza Soup. Yeah, look up Gaza Soup Kitchen. I don't know the link. Our link is unrwausa.org/donate.
Great. Thank you, Maura. And I want to thank Diego, Victor, Sophia, Thomas, and Max, who produced the show. You can find me at chrishedges.substack.com.
Thank you, Chris.